Hi there, this is Joe Meadows and welcome to Safety Leaders Now, the show where we cut through the noise and identify the strategies and tactics that today's top safety leaders use to keep their teams safe. On today's episode, I sit down with Shane Menefee. Shane's newly heading up safety at a company called Legrand, roughly 10,000 employees, big company, big challenges where they're dealing with M&A and things like that. So it was really nice to sit down with Shane, understand how he's kind of triaged the situation since joining Legrand, what he's focused on going forward, what metrics he thinks matters, what metrics he thinks are a waste of time. Shane's a pretty funny guy and really enjoyed the conversation. So with that, I'm going to hand it over and let's get this episode started. So start off, who are you? Where do you work? Give us the background.
Well, I'm Shane Menefee. I'm with Legrand Group currently. And from a background perspective, so I've been doing environmental health and safety for 20 plus years. My entire career has been built around environmental health and safety in one aspect or another. And I've really been industry agnostic. I started in paper products and paper mills, went and dabbled in consulting a little bit because I thought that was going to be my cup of tea, and I couldn't have been more wrong. Then I left there and went into back into some manufacturing and through plastics and adhesives, food products, medical device, and now electronic components. So it's really, there's no two businesses have been alike, which has been great to have some broader perspective to see how things are being made and how each place is kind of skinning their proverbial cat.
Gotcha. Okay. So maybe before we get into the safety stuff, can you just help me understand, like, what does Legrand do? How do they make their money for those of us who are less familiar?
Yeah, absolutely. So I didn't know either before I started going down the road with them in this role, and they make electronic devices, electronic components, and that really runs the gambit from if you have a flat screen TV on your wall, mounted to your wall, you're probably using one of their TV mounts. So some of them are literally just functional devices, all the way to individual light switches, both home and industrial controls, lighting solutions. So they're making fluorescent lights, making the components that control the lights, both on an automated and manual perspective.
So primarily just or kind of electronics focused, but manufacturing business. What's the size of the company? What are you looking at from an employee count perspective?
Well, give or take 10,000 people in my division. So it's a global business based in France, and I'm responsible for all of the North America, South America business, but somehow that still includes a little Europe and a little Asia. So you tell me.
Okay. Parlez-vous français?
Sprachen zero Deutsch.
Okay, fair enough. I've since we've been emailing the last little while, I've gotten a kick out of your French email disclaimer. I said I don't think Shane's ever spoken to French to me. Okay, so
email disclaimer. How about that? You learn something every day.
Yeah, and then when you decline my emails, it's the response comes in French. So it was interesting to see. Anyway, all that to say, so working for this French manufacturing organization focused on electrical components, 10,000 employees. How long have you been there?
I've only been here for about 3 months now, brand new.
So nice and fresh. Okay, we'll probably dig into that a little bit as we get going. So new company, relatively large employee base. Maybe before we get into the nuts and bolts, let's pause here. So can you maybe articulate for me how you would kind of describe the current sort of EHS strategy at this company, understanding that you're relatively new to the role?
Sure. So the business, one of the aspects that might be unique to this business, but it's probably a challenge everywhere in some format, is that the business is largely built on M&A. And that brings with it a lot of challenges in that there's been an attempt prior to my arrival, but that's why I'm here, is to kind of centralize and standardize the process across all of the sites. So there's individual pockets of goodness and the opposite. So is really to try to formalize that strategy to bring everybody underneath one umbrella and raise the maturity level of the health and safety approach.
So current game plan, just get everybody on the same page as best you can.
Yeah. What are we measuring, and can we measure it all the same way? So it's literally square one.
All right. Easy enough. Okay. So when you're trying to knit all these pieces together, again, and I'm sure this will come up. I've already recorded some episodes along similar themes, but I think navigating M&A is a theme that we hear about all the time from sort of health and safety leaders. Relatively common concern. With that in mind, maybe before we get into the details, can you give me a little bit of insight? I want to make sure that we're sharing some of this more tactical, in the weeds type of things. And with that, can you help explain a little bit of like, what does the org chart look like in your safety organization right now? Or, who reports to you? What do they manage? And is that the way you see things staying? Are there other roles you want to be adding into the function?
So the current structure is my preference, or I prefer a matrix business. I will implement that wherever I go. And I do, from a regional perspective or maybe a core competency level, I'm fine having some direct reports, but the majority of my EHS professionals, I like to be site-based and report to the site leader, site director, whoever the senior most person at the site is, because I want that accountability to stay local. I don't want that site director to have the built-in excuse of, well, that person doesn't report to me, or that's Shane's problem at corporate. No, Steve, this is your problem at your site. You own it. You're responsible for the outcome, and you have the resources committed to you to resolving it. So I'm here to support you. I'm not here to own your problems.
Okay. Well, it's not, I won't speculate too much on who Steve is. But no, I think that makes a lot of sense. So matrix org, everybody's reporting into sort of local leadership in your various sites. And then I guess dotted line to you as far as overall strategy, keeping things consistent.
Yep. And they may be getting 75% of their direction from me, but that hard line reporting, who's giving that performance review is that site leader.
Okay. And can you just elaborate a little bit more? Like how many people are we talking here as far as sites and things like that within your EHS org?
So at Legrand, we have, or I'm responsible for about, let's call it 60 sites.
Okay.
About 20 of those are really office environments. So in those locations, I certainly don't have a full-time or even a part-time environmental health and safety dedicated resource. At the other 40, 25 of those are large manufacturing or distribution centers. At each one of those, I'm going to have someone responsible for and accountable for environmental health and safety. They are that subject matter expert / champion or cheerleader, I will often call it. Some people don't like that term, but you are the person that's really keeping people on task and helping support and drive those initiatives and keep things in highly visible and in the forefront of everybody's focus.
So with that 60, like, are you saying EHS org roughly 60 people, give or take? Or?
No, I would say EHS org for that 60 sites is probably closer to 30 people.
Okay, gotcha. All right, cool.
But even at those office sites, someone is accountable for, because we're not going to leave a site behind, because we're not going to leave a person behind. Mm-hmm. Those people report to that site. I need someone responsible for the even limited environmental health and safety initiatives that we're going to have, because we need to touch everybody. So at some of those office sites, that site leader is the environmental health and safety contact or person.
Okay, gotcha. Oh, and so with that, you talked a lot about, you started to talk about this idea of getting everybody on the same page of kind of being the current MO for the safety org. So can you give me an example of how, you coming in as a fresh voice, how are you making sure that those various site leads and also, let's say, cheerleaders, but local EHS professionals, how do they know, or how do you make sure that they understand where you're trying to bring them right now?
Well, I mean, the first thing that I've got to do is listen a lot and clearly understand where they're at now and where they've been. For me to come in day one and say, well, this is where we're going. Well, what if we've already tried that and I don't understand? I'm going to get a lot of pushback, or they've heard that before. Or what if they feel like where they're at is very far along that maturity curve? That's disrespectful and a little borderline egotistical to assume that I just know, without understanding the business at all or the challenges that we have, that I just know how to apply my super program. I don't think that's going to succeed very often.
So I totally get where you're coming from there. So maybe to kick things off, what is it? Can you give me some specific examples of what you've done since joining Legrand to kind of get that pulse of where these various sites are today and how you're checking in with the teams to make sure that you can push them in the right direction?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in one-on-one interaction as often as possible. So in having, trying to take it with a little bit of humility or understanding that I'm here first to learn what our issues are and how I can best support you. That's my role is literally only to support the work that's going on at our manufacturing and distribution centers. That's where the majority of our people are. That's where the majority of our risk is. So injuries are not happening in my office. They're happening out on the shop floor. I'm not going to be out there every day, so I need to support those people that are out there every day doing that. So having open lines of communication and making them understand that I'm here to support you. I got to do that through earning their trust. So those one-on-one engagement opportunities, whether that's in small groups, it doesn't have to be, half-hour calls with 30 people. You're not going to accomplish anything else. But in small groups and just being willing to shut up and listen to what everybody's telling you. Right? Ask the right questions, asking open-ended questions to get more details and more information, and then taking some good notes and coming back and doing something for those people. Right? They'll tell you what they need if you just listen. The good ones, right? The people that are going to stick around that you really need on your side. Fix some things for them. If you fix things for people, they'll tell you more things that need to be fixed.
Yeah, I can empathize with that. So is that when you go into those calls, are you going in with sort of specific bullet points that you're looking to pull threads on, or is it purely, hey, I'm the new guy, tell me what's busted?
So it's a little of both. So I prefer an agenda, but I prefer very, very open-ended, short, just a couple of bullets, right? And it might even say, bullet one, tell me what's busted, right? What's not working? What is working, right? I try to start out positive. What is working? What's been helpful? What have you accomplished? Tell me about you. What do you like doing? What do you dislike doing? Because the other thing that I find about people is that the more I can put you in position to do things that you enjoy doing, the better you'll do them. And we might have somebody out there that enjoys the opposite of what another one does. So if I can combine the two of you, we end up with a perfect pair. So it's a brief agenda so that we stay on track and so that person has an understanding. Without an agenda, especially new guy coming in, it sometimes generates a little bit of fear or anxiety. They're going to be closed off. That's not helpful. But so giving just 3-4 bullet points of what's going well for you. give me some of your successes, and then what's not going well and how can I help make that better is what I look to do.
So if it's not prying too much, would you be able to give us some examples of, some of that feedback that you got that you were particular, like one where you're like, that's awesome, we're going to be able to do something about that really quick when you had these sessions with your team?
Yeah, people, and this is not an uncommon problem, it's not unique to Legrand, is there's a lot of people that want information and want data, right? They've got a finance guy that wants to include health and safety metrics. So he goes and he's constantly, they're being asked to produce data and input things into spreadsheets. And, look, my health and safety, that cheerleader is not doing a very good job cheering people on when they're sitting in front of their computer. I want them out on the floor, engaging with our people, identifying risks and pulling more people into that, under that safety umbrella. I don't want them in front of their computer. So one of the common things that I hear here, and I've heard everywhere when I've joined an organization or fold another department underneath me, is all this reporting and stuff. And if they're not seeing any action with it, right? It's reporting for the sake of reporting is an enormous waste of time. There's no benefit in that. We collect data because you're going to affect the data. Otherwise, don't waste the time collecting it. So that's one common theme that I heard almost uniformly across the board here, but I hear almost everywhere is, I don't know, we're sending all this information in, I don't know what anybody's doing with it. And the answer is probably nothing. If you don't know why we're collecting this data, shame on me or whoever's asking you to not even give you the benefit of the doubt to tell you why they're getting it. But then it's just being reported for the sake of reporting.
So with that, maybe just to dive into a bit more of an example, I see that as a super common trend in EHS, but I think a lot of people struggle to understand, okay, well, everybody's being measured by how many observations do we submit? How do we set a new standard here that's going to drive people to engage a little bit more? So could you give me an idea of, if we use observations as an example, what you might like, is there anything else you're looking to measure to help people understand that we're measuring the efficacy of these things instead of just reporting to report, as you said?
Even looking at that of how many observations did we do? Is that the goal? Is the goal to do observations? That's not the goal. The goal is to change behaviors, right? I want to. The goal ultimately is to reduce risk. That's the whole goal, in my opinion. The whole goal of health and safety is risk reduction. That's the goal. So how do we work backwards from that goal? And I get, yes, the observations are necessary, but doing 100 observations is not necessarily better than 50 observations. If both groups only resulted in 3 positive changes, then they're even. So don't measure the outcome that you want, not the precursor to it necessarily, right? And I get that it gets a little sticky between the leading, lagging things, but so yeah, maybe we drive observations in year 1 or the first 6 months of that process, because what we're trying to do is get bodies out on the floor. I just need you to get used to this process and accustomed to it. Now I'm going to refine it from there, and we're going to do the observation, but I'm no longer measuring the observation. I want to measure the effectiveness of it. So what were the changes? So we did 100 observations, but we only did 20 positive changes. But I don't know, nobody now cares if the metric is now 30 positive changes. They'll take those 100 and they'll give you 40 positive changes. But if you keep measuring observations, you may end up with no positive changes because people were going through the motions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the sort of classic bad incentives. Bad metrics create bad incentives, and you have a bunch of people wasting their time, spinning their wheels, saying, oh, why? I think a lot of safety practitioners talk a lot about the fact that safety doesn't get any respect. But meanwhile, we ask people to do a lot of things that I think are very well intentioned, but we're not really measuring the performance, or we're not really asking why, and is this achieving that goal? So no, I think that makes a ton of sense.
it's extremely frustrating that the mentality of what safety doesn't get any respect. Well, it's not going to get any respect if it's self-serving goals. The finance guy doesn't care about safety because those aren't part of his goals. If you've created your goals to only benefit yourself or your own department, it's a business. We're running a business here. The only goal that matters is, did we make money or not? Right? That's not a dirty word, is to say we're all here to make money. So how does injury preventions or observations or whatever metric we're producing or measuring ourselves on from a health and safety standpoint, how does that further the overall business goal of making money? And if you can't put those into words, then you're not going to get the respect from the finance person or the ops person or the maintenance person or the engineering guy that just looks at you as a roadblock to their own goals.
And when I think I mean, it's not to say that we don't have, obviously, as employers, some moral obligation to keep people safe. But I think the reality is that on the deeper level, all of this, the way we transact and measure this is all financial. And so to say, yeah, we can do what we want to do as safety people, we can push in that direction, but you need to be able to translate it into the language of business, which is dollars and cents, and to not be so scared of that you're somehow subverting the process. It's not a sort of, being righteous doesn't help anything make anything happen.
No, and I it's the difference being most people working for a company doesn't make you a good or bad person somehow, right? You have to take some things at a given that, yeah, I care about you, Joe, because you're a human being, not because you work for the same company as me or not. So I have to assume we're all good people. And of course we're doing health and safety because we care about each other and we want each other, we want each other to go home to their families the way that they showed up. Those are important, but I think we can all identify with that without a problem. Where we seem to have this hesitance is, but I'm doing that for Legrand. I'm doing it for money, and they have me here for money. Yeah. That's not a problem. Let's just be honest and upfront and approach it that way, and assume that we're all looking out for each other's health and safety because we're human beings.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that goes. This touches on something that I try to ask people about a little bit, and that goes back to this whole sort of like in executive engagement piece. So, I talk to people all the time who talk about, oh, I want to do these changes, I want to do that, but I can never get budget because people see safety as this kind of necessary evil and they just want to minimize costing. And I think to a certain extent, that's not just safety, that's any department. You need a business case to get money to do stuff.
Every department.
Yeah. So I guess with that, with you coming in fresh with Legrand, are you can you just give me some insight into, to whatever degree you're comfortable sharing, how are you building that relationship with the broader executive team so that you can say, hey guys, these are the metrics that I'm going to be instituting. This is what the strategy is. And how do you get that buy-in so that they know that you're all working together and that you're going to have a positive change? What does that look like?
Well, again, we're running a business here. We're not running a safety department or a safety program. I expect the finance guy to of course he's looking at his own finance metrics, but he should also be running the business. Yeah. So when I'm going in and you're exactly right, in every single function, every department all says the same things. They never spend any money. Never give me any money. And I would push back that, well, it's because you're terrible at asking for money. You know what I mean? You want somebody really good at asking for money. We'll get my daughter on the phone. she can get it right out of your hands. But where's my strengths? Where's my weaknesses? But where's that other person? What's their interest, right? So how is what you're asking for? Because there's only so much money. So if they're going to give me money, that means that everybody else in that room is sacrificing that money for their own wants and needs. So they need to understand, what are they going to get out of that? how is that going to improve the bottom line? So my proverbial or imaginary $100,000, what's the benefit of spending it on health and safety versus the benefit on spending it on new product development, or a new piece of equipment for ops, or a new piece of talent acquisition software, or a head count in HR. If it's not more valuable, if that return on investment is not higher for me than them, then the money should go to them. And I should be upfront in saying that, and just challenge you straight off the bat that my project's going to beat the pants off of your project. And if it doesn't, then why would you give it to me? Yeah. You know, this idea of, I think the worst thing a safety professional can do is kind of walk in with the attitude of, it frustrates me to no end when I've joined companies and they have a CapEx process with a box on there that says safety. As somehow, if I check this box, I automatically get the money. And I think that's been a crutch for environmental health and safety professionals for too long, that then you use that 10 times in a row, you come back the 11th time, eventually they're going to say no. And now you've not honed your skills or sharpened your teeth on, how do I sell this project equal to the next guy in the room, that somehow you thought you were operating from an unlevel playing field. And maybe you have been a little bit, but that's done environmental health and safety professionals a disservice.
I love the way that you articulated that, because I think that's actually a part of the sort of catalyst behind this show, is to say the people who I've engaged with sort of in my role, that I've not only enjoyed talking to the most, but the people who seem to be having the most success career-wise are these people who don't get not too caught up in let's say the sort of safety community, because I think a lot of that is obviously, you know, the quest for excellence, understanding what's happening. I think that's amazing. But I think there is a kind of a division of people who say, I need to be an effective executive by the measures that executives are measured by. So again, how do you rally people behind what you're doing? How do you measure it effectively? How do you set KPIs that are going to, you know, help people understand above me and below me that we're headed in the right direction, and that they don't shy away from that to simply say, well, I'm trying to make people safe, so, you know, give me the get out of jail free card here. And I think that there's such an appetite for that in this space. So with, you know, understanding that, what does that look like for you when you're coming in? You know, again, you probably haven't done this yet, I could be wrong, but you're coming into a new organization and you're trying to, I would assume some of that comes with talking to that executive team and saying, hey, we need you to get behind something. Can you give me some examples of, you know, what specifically are you trying to articulate to them to help them understand that putting some money into your department is going to lead to a return for the business?
So, you know, I've got to, again, joining the new organization, or, you know, you were talking about M&A, acquiring a new site or a new business and trying to fold that in. You have to do your due diligence up front to understand what your priorities are going to be, because even if it doesn't matter how good a salesman I am and can pitch all these projects, we're still eventually going to run out of money. Even if the business said, I'm going to give, yep, all of your projects are wonderful, Shane, we're going to fund them. They're going to hit a point, because I will spend all your money. I'll give you great ways to spend all of it. But we're going to hit a point where the budget's done for this year. So I have to make sure that I have my ducks in a row. And when we're going to draw that line, I know everything above that line is where it should be, and things that are below it are where that should be. So step one is making sure you have all the information and have prioritized your things correctly, so that when I walk in that room and ask for that funding, when I say, you know, when I list them or pitch them, I'm pitching them in order that I need that funding. And I think, you know, that word, the difference between need and want, you know, you need to be very honest with yourself of the differences between those things. You know, people will say, I need another person. What do you need another head count for? Well, because there's all this work to do. you know who doesn't care about the amount of work you have to do, Joe? Everyone. Nobody cares about your workload, right? So you don't need another person. You want another person. We only need it if those things that aren't getting done are more impactful than the cost of having that extra person do them, right? It's a return on investment.
So not to cut you off here, but how do you measure that? So you're going and you're saying you're trying to have these sort of rational, fact-based discussions with leadership, which is tough in safety because some things can be kind of qualitative. What are you trying to institute, or what do you see as the ideal scenario to say, hey, this is what's telling me where we're being effective, where we're not? And I think if you can also expand on how often do you take the pulse of those things? So like, what does it look like weekly versus monthly versus quarterly? How do you make sure that you're staying on top of it?
So you have to make data-driven arguments. Another failing of a lot of health and safety people in my career, because I'm leading the function now and have in my past few roles, but early in my career, the first 10 plus years of my career, I was learning from both the good and the bad of others above me. And what I saw a lot is they're pitching things on feelings or on soft, concepts and ideas. I need money to make us safer. What? Like, well, how are we measuring that? So you've got to back up things with data, right? Nobody can argue with the data. They can only argue my data is better than your data, or what I'm going to improve is better than what you're going to improve. So anywhere you can argue in dollars and cents, that everybody can identify with it. It doesn't matter your function. So things like work comp costs, you can focus on in the US, or in different insurance metrics and policy metrics, things that we're actually spending money on that maybe we could spend less money on. So environmental initiatives on electricity reduction and absolute reductions, things like that. So cost savings and then cost avoidance next are understandable by everyone, and you should always try to use those. Those are much harder metrics and more easily understood, but you can't do that everywhere. So in some of the other metrics that you can pull are, ultimately one of the best things that health and safety can contribute to an organization is it gains organizational trust from your employees. They trust a company that looks out for an employee's health and safety in a very genuine, transparent way acquires the trust of that employee, right? We've talked before, Joe, about the employee they don't quit their job to go to work for the company across the street for 50 cents an hour or $1 an hour. I mean, there is an amount of money that anybody, look, taking all offers out there. There's an amount of money that everybody will quit and leave for, but they're not doing it for 50 cents or $1 an hour. They're just not. They're unhappy, not about their pay. That might be a part of it, but they're unhappy with lots of other things. They don't trust that their employer has their back. They don't believe their employer listens to them. If you can gain their trust and their loyalty, they will stay longer. The longer they stay, the better workforce you have. You don't have to invest as much in training. You don't have to invest as much in quality control, because we produce quality products because that guy's been doing it for years. He knows how to do it. He or she produces the same things every time. You get predictable results. Health and safety can do that for you more cheaply and more quickly, in my opinion, than any other function can. So if I give you that 50 cents or that $1 an hour raise, that's going to make you happy for it. So the other metrics that you can bring into the conversation are what are our turnover rates? right?
Yep.
What are our turnover rates compared to our competitors, to those people across the street, to competitors that are doing health and safety at a high level? What are the turnover rates? And then there's all kinds of information on there of what that turnover equates into dollars and cents. Because I don't care what other data point you pull, use that data point to then convert it to a dollar figure. Mm. And then cite something else, but it has to come back to dollars and cents.
Is turnover something that you're talking with your site-based reports about? Is that something that when you're checking in with them, obviously they're reporting locally. Is that something you talk about on a site-by-site basis?
Yeah, absolutely. Both in a what's the impact to the organization, but the impact to my environmental health and safety metrics, right? That every time the new person comes in, what do I got to do? You got to run them through a whole bunch of health and safety training, both regulatory required and intra-company, the trainings that we've decided are good for you, that are going to keep you safe while you work here. That no matter how good that training is or how conscientious that employee is, they don't have that same level of experience. They are much, much more likely to be injured than my person that's been there for 5 years or 10 years. That's a proven fact. I shouldn't even have to give you any statistics. You should just know that. So just selfishly, when we have a new person, it's a pain in my butt. And it's likely to be a negative impact on my own personal metrics. So we want to eliminate that or reduce that as much as we can from a health and safety perspective, but you can guarantee that every other function has that same pain point. So again, back to the quality person, got to train him on quality procedures, and I know he's going to produce crappier product. So I have more errors, going to have more issues. My ops person, they don't like turnover either. No individual function is like, yes, more turnover. We needed some fresh faces in here. So everybody can speak that metric. So turnovers may be one that you don't necessarily need to equate to dollars, but there's enough data out there because everybody's interested in it. So turnover is a good other piece of data to use to justify the investment in whatever initiative you're trying to push.
That again makes tons of sense. And is that something like, are you interfacing with HR on that, or is that something you're measuring independently? How do you actually run that in practice?
So if you don't have site leaders or ops leaders that are in tune with what their current and historical turnover rate is, there's character flaw number one. That you have a poor site leader, right? That is so impactful to the business. So that should be plastered everywhere, that data metric, that metric. But for sure, HR has that is a core metric for them, is what is our turnover rate? How do we reduce that number?
Gotcha. Yeah. And now along that line, is there anything else that you see as these kind of like low hanging fruit, easy available data that have been helpful for you in driving real performance in your org? Whether it be turnover or anything else kind of along those same lines?
You can pull other. It depends on how big your organization is and how like for like sites you have. One of the best things you can do, because it's always helpful to compare yourself or benchmark yourself to some competitors within the industry. That's helpful, but it's most helpful and most identifiable if I can compare what I deem as a good, mature, high functioning site versus a lower functioning site. We won't call them poor, but a lower functioning site. And so we have worse health and safety metrics. I bet they have worse quality metrics. I bet they have worse attainment measures, on time, in full, lower OEE numbers, and which is, and not the sidebar here, but well enough that I'm going to take a few. understand and be able to speak in the other functions and stakeholders language, right? If you don't understand what OEE is, go Google it, make sure you know how to calculate it, and ask what are those, what is your site's OEE? You know, understand what cost of cost of poor quality is and how your company measures it. Understand what are the other functional KPIs, what they mean and how they're calculated, so you can speak in someone else's language.
Okay, so to pull a thread on your sidebar, how do you make sure that your safety team meets those metrics and can speak within the organization and isn't just throwing TRIRs at people who don't understand what that means?
Yeah, so if it's our metrics, stop using acronyms, spell it out, and then show them how it's calculated and what that, and distill it down into something that means to them. What people don't, people don't understand. Think about it if you were explaining it to your kids or to your spouse, someone that is somewhat interested in what you're doing, but not really, yeah. And that's really what you're doing when you're standing in front of a leadership board that doesn't have other health and safety professionals in it. So that when you say, well, our total recordable injury rate, which is better than saying TRIR,
yeah,
is 3.2. I don't understand. Hey, last year we injured 36 people. 12 of those were serious injuries that required time away from work and maybe missed ball games at their daughter's sport.
Yeah.
People you can personalize, they can identify with that, but that's not something they want. Nobody, again, back to the humanity side of it, nobody wants to be the company that injures other people, right? Yeah. We want that. So these are human beings we're talking about. Talk about them in terms of human beings. Don't say 3.2, say 18 injuries versus 13 last year. We're going the wrong direction. We've failed as a business and as a group of leaders. We failed 5 more people than we failed last year. What are we doing about this? Right? So use hearts and minds, but do so in a way that makes sense to them.
And is that something you're communicating to your team? Are you having them making sure that they're communicating that way? And are you doing anything to help? You were talking about some of the internal metrics that the rest of the business are using. Is there anything that you do to help make sure that your team can communicate with the rest of the organization in the organization's terms?
Yeah, absolutely. So we talk in terms of in manufacturing terms, especially at our factories. We will talk in terms of downtime. When we talk about, there's a lot of corollaries when we talk about non-routine work. Non-routine work causes a lot of injuries. Well, why do we have non-routine work? Because we have poor OEE. We have lines that aren't functioning, that are down, that are being repaired because we don't have good PM compliance. Yeah. Right. So all of these things are interrelated. So you can't just be in your own bubble. So when we talk about non-routine work, don't just stop there. Talk about what are the reasons that non-routine work becomes necessary. What creates that? Don't worry about the safety of non-routine work if you can eliminate the non-routine work.
Well, I think that, I'm a huge believer that a PM is fundamentally a risk reduction document, but we have all these barriers in our mind that it's because non-routine work is so high risk, we create PMs so that they become routine. And I think that can be such a powerful way to communicate with other people in the organization is you're doing this anyway. You're just doing it in a different context.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. But it's very worthwhile time to educate your site EHS leaders on just, business 101, manufacturing business 101 terminology and process, and understand, when they're sitting, they should be part of that site leadership team and should be sitting in those staff meetings. They are simply a that plant is just a smaller form of the larger business. So I'm sitting in meetings with the head of operations is absolutely no different than my site HSE person sitting in the site leadership meeting with the director of operations or the plant manager. It's the exact same microcosm. There's no difference. It's just scale. But the approach is the same.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So I guess with that, I want to just circle back to one of the things I mentioned earlier, which was around sort of how are you taking the pulse of the direction that you're headed right now? So, turnover is one of those metrics, obviously, but can you just give me a feel for, I guess, on a shorter time scale? So let's say on a weekly basis, how are you checking in with those sites, or are you checking in at all? And then on a monthly basis, are you doing any sort of deeper dives? And I'd be really curious to know, many of us have stats fatigue. What are the ones that you're seeing as the kind of bellwethers for where things are going? What are the ones where you're really trying to dig in and pull a thread or stuff like that?
It's a little different now because I'm only 3 months into the role. So there's a lot
In the hot seat.
Yeah. And it's a lot heavier touch, right? I'm up in people's business a lot more than I think for sure they would like. And I would like too, right? I mean, I'm a firm believer in, I'm going to put expectations out there. I'm going to get your feedback on them to the point that you're in 100% agreement that these are the expectations. I will give you the opportunity to set your own timeline because I believe you will be more aggressive on yourself than I would ever be. Then if I give you some extra time, it feels like I'm the good guy when I would have given you a hell of a lot more time than you gave yourself. So you set your own timeline, you agree to those expectations. Now I should be able to hold you accountable. And in the meantime, I should let you do your thing. How you do things and your approach is going to be different than mine. And if I try to push mine onto you, that's just going to slow you down. It's going to frustrate you and is not going to end in the same result. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to hold you accountable because we're constantly measuring the most important things. And to me, they should be few and far between, and they should be impactful, and they should be constantly changing. So, but not constantly meaning maybe they're 3 months or 6 months or annual, but we should not be measuring things year over year. The lagging metrics that we're always going to have that TRIR that we're going to have that, a few of those metrics we are going to, that are lagging. That's how we all judge ourselves. That is the ultimate goal, is 0 injuries. So we need to understand, where are we trending towards that? But all of the things that we're doing, the actions we're taking to generate that reduction in injuries, those metrics should be changing. So yes, year 1, I'm measuring observations. Year 2, I'm measuring an effectiveness metric for those observations. And then looking at the data and going, oh, where do we take it from here? Where have we seen success and need to push, or where have we seen other failure and we need to push there? So it should constantly be evolving what we're measuring, because what's the old saying, you'll if you don't measure it, you won't get change. But make sure you're careful in what you're measuring, because you will get change. It just might not be the change that you want.
Yeah.
So if you're constantly looking at, well, if we're measuring something, what is changing, and is it the thing that we want to change? So just measuring observations, well, what will you change? You're going to get more observations. Great. But observations isn't the goal. So what's the next thing we measure to get closer to the goal of the actions that are reducing the risk, that's reducing the injuries?
Is there anything, or to peel back on that, you talked about things being few and far between. And I think that's something that a lot of people can kind of empathize with, is some people get so data obsessed that they don't leave a lot of room to do anything, because we're measuring so much and we're creating all these reports, and we don't actually get out there and make an impact. Is there anything at your current role or, in previous roles you've had, is there anything that you've stopped measuring and seen positive results because it gave your team more bandwidth to focus on other things? Is there anything you said, listen, guys, this just doesn't make sense for us anymore? Because I think that's a really important conversation to have in the EHS world, where it can sometimes be difficult to ever do less because we're always concerned that it'll make us look bad if something happens. So just curious, I mean, maybe not, but is there anything in there that you can think of?
Yeah, I think stopping measuring, stopping putting focus on measuring and reporting things that aren't providing the positive changes is a positive change in and of itself. It's an addition by subtraction to give you more time. I think if you're measuring more than 4 things, then you're measuring too many things. And one of those should be your total recordable injury rate or severity rate. If you put that lagging metric into one bucket, then you have 3 other leading metrics that are driving those larger goals. That's enough. And you need to do those to the point where it's perfection. Focus on those things. The people will focus on training hours is a good one. I nothing drives me up a wall more than training hours. Again, what's the point of putting someone in a room? We're measuring training hours is measuring how much money did we waste.
Yeah.
Okay? Measure training effectiveness. If I can tell you in 5 minutes everything you need to know, what's the value in sitting you in a room for a half hour? That's entirely pointless. So measure it's what you're measuring, but don't only measure a few things. You start spreading things out. You can't affect 10 things. So again, if I'm not going to affect change, positive change, why am I measuring it? And it might be important, and you're like, man, we need to really know. That's fine. Are you going to have the time to do something about it when you get that bad news? If not, then watch out, because somebody's going to make you find time. So measure things that you can change and that you have the time to be able to change. Fix those, drill those down in, instill them and integrate them into the process, and then start measuring that next thing. Fix that one and measure the next thing. But 3 or 4 metrics, because those 3 or 4 metrics must be initiatives. If they're not attached to initiatives, then you're missing the point of measuring something.
Yeah, more sort of like, this is a hypothesis we have. We're going to run some tests against it. We're either going to win or we're going to lose, and then we're going to move on to the next thing.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Iterative improvements, engineering mindset. I think that all makes sense.
Yes.
So go ahead. Sorry.
No, the engineering mindset, the idea of continuous improvement, of plan, do, check, act, that process continuously, but it should be an evolving process, right? It's not circular, same after same after same. It's constantly evolving toward the next. What's the next plan? What's the next doing? Then we check it, and then that act is, we've checked it and we've seen failure or we've seen additional opportunity. So now let's act by making a new plan, new doings, and so on.
So with that, I mean, just to not push back, but to peel back on that a little bit, when you're talking about changing these metrics over time to better evaluate the projects that you're currently invested in, how do you balance that necessary change to make sure that we're focused on the right things against creating sort of an environment of uncertainty for your team and them saying, I thought we were going this way and now we're going this way. Why is this changing now? How do you communicate to them so that they still feel secure?
Well, it's data. You should be able to justify why you're taking the actions, or you have the opinions that you have. And into a way, what it's you haven't mastered something until you can teach it to someone else. Right. So I explain that to my kids all the time. Oh, I know how to do that math. All right. Show me, teach me how to do it. And if you can't teach me how to do it, you don't know it well enough. So if I'm as the leader deciding these are the things these are the actions we're going to take, these are the things we're going to measure, I need to be able to teach someone exactly why I believe those are the right choices to be made. If I haven't, then I haven't done my due diligence. So, and there's nothing wrong with whether it's your whole sort of cohort of environmental health and safety leaders, or maybe a more mature or interested subset of them, of having them be involved in that initiative selection or data selection or metric process.
EHS steering committee, like just having those people there who are,
absolutely, right. Involving them in, you're trying to affect change upon them. The more involved they are, the more they will accept that change, because they felt like they were a part of it. Lots of people will resist that change just for the sake of resisting, especially in the US, right? I found we have one of the most difficult, if the most difficult culture, because we're literally designed to say no first. Hey, go do this. No, like, it's good for you. No. Yeah. Like, and the pandemic has done nothing but to just shine a giant light on that at times fault in that culture. So know that, and then use it to your advantage. Lead people down a road. Take that presentation, instead of saying, here are all the metrics, or we're going to focus on hand injuries, and this is what we're going to do. Instead of doing that, just throw the Pareto up there of injuries. I assume you were working on hand injuries, or your thought was hand injuries, because you've done the due diligence and saw that this is a real problem for us. So just lead them to the water. Put it up there and go, well, what do you guys think we should work on? And then if some idiot says something other than hand injuries, well, you know who to cut from the team. But everybody can read a chart. So just put the chart up there. What's another old saying? I love sayings, apparently. But statistics lie, and liars use statistics.
Yeah.
Right. So you select the data that forms your argument and put it out there, and let them interpret it in the way that only makes sense to most people, that forms your argument for them. So, you think hand injuries, Joe? I agree, that's a great idea. Now, what could we do about this? And then let people talk, and they'll tell you all kinds of things that's going to improve your process, that you then can float out some other ideas, and then they'll build on those. But if you just go in and say, hey guys, we're focusing on hand injuries, I need you to do this, 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 and this, you missed an opportunity to improve your process, and are likely just to get a bunch of pushback that wastes everyone's time.
Yeah. And is that something you've done since joining Legrand, what you've just explained there?
Absolutely. I hope nobody on my team watches this, because I'm giving away all my manipulation tactics. But no, it is, but I would challenge them, look, I tell people always, look, I'm a big fan of conflict. If we're not having conflict in our meetings, either the meeting was useless, or we're not being honest with each other. Or I need a more diverse group of participants in that meeting, because the more we can debate it, the more we discuss it, and as long as it's in a respectful way, we can even yell at each other, and it's perfectly fine. The more we do that, the better the outcome is going to be, because we're going to get to the truth and much quicker and in much greater detail than we would if we all sit around and just are like-minded and agree, or I just have a bunch of yes men that just nod their head, walk out of the room, and go, that guy's an idiot.
Yeah. Like, I think it ultimately shows the healthiness of the team too. If people can have a disagreement, even if they get a little heated, to know that you've made them feel secure enough in that environment to be able to say, I don't think this is the best idea, and that you can kind of use the Socratic method to pull this thing apart and make sure that best idea wins. Like, I think that makes a ton of sense.
But that's the key. You said something in there, is that they feel secure enough to do it, right? You have to have a level of trust, and even so, I've been here for 3 months, right? That trust comes from consistently saying the same things and then making it at least a dang attempt to do what you're saying. If I say the words like, hey, how can I support you? And then you tell me and I don't do that thing, and you don't always have to do it. You have to respond. If you say, how can I support you, Joe? And you come back to me and say, well, I need another head count because I can't get all this stuff done. Right. Well, for sure, the easy thing would be, well, let me just go get you another body and there you go, problem solved. That'd be great. But we're not always going to be able to make that choice. I don't think that person needs that. You don't need me to just do that exact thing for you, but you do need me to listen and come back to you and go, I see what you're doing. I see why you need that, why all those things are important. What things can I take from you, or what things maybe can we shift to someone else? Or, you know what, we're just going to agree that, yep, these are all important, but they're unreasonable expectations that I have of you, Joe, to do all those things. Let's mark these things off your list. And then when we have the budget or we have the ability to add someone to your team, let's do that. And then we'll pick these things back up. It's not that they're not important. It's that they just, your time with your family and your sanity is also important. So I can't have you working all the time. And I need you to do these 4 things have to be done. So these other 7 are going to have to be set aside. Almost everybody responds, great. At least we're on the same page with the expectations that they're reasonable and they can be achieved. So you've got to have that level of trust. And when you say the words like, I want you to tell me, I tell this to my team and anyone, if I'm wrong, if I'm an idiot, tell me, hey, Shane, you're an idiot. Or if I'm being an asshole, which is absolutely going to happen, I promise you, tell me I am. And then, but I have to respond respectfully. I had a boss one time, I sat across the desk from him. He's berating somebody over an injury review. And it was, was the ops VP, and he's explaining, he's yelling at a site. They had 2 injuries. They had 500 employees. They had 2 injuries in the last year and a half. And they have an injury. And he's explaining how everything they're doing is unacceptable, and would hang up the phone, and because, it doesn't help to correct especially your boss in front of other people. I asked him, hey, can I give you some constructive criticism, some feedback? Oh yeah, absolutely. Always. Worst thing I ever did, because he was dishonest with me. Right. I told him, I think you were an asshole there. I think you were over the top. I think these guys are really trying. There's a time for that. Absolutely. That wasn't the time. That wasn't the group. Hey, great. And then we had one of the worst working relationships I've ever had. At the same time, he never came to me and said, I want your feedback anytime you want to give it to me. I made the mistake of assuming that he wanted to hear the words that I said, and he didn't.
I feel like I might know that guy. Anyway, we'll save that for another conversation. But I think with
does his first name start with a J and end with an O?
I don't know. Okay, so I guess with all that, I think ultimately what you've spoken about here is just like fundamentally good leadership techniques, right? Make expectations clear, make sure that what I talk about a lot for whatever degree people are interested is I see your responsibilities as a leader as being 3 things: that you make the expectations clear, that you make the resources available, and that you have the right person in the role. And that 85% of the time it's going to be either expectations weren't clear or you didn't provide the resources as the leader. And it's almost never going to be the person in that situation. But sometimes it is. And you just have to deal with that when it comes around. But I think that'll make sense to me. So I guess if anybody's listening to this who's aspiring safety professional, and they said, oh, that Shane guy, he sounded pretty cool. Is there, if they want to come, let's say you have an opening on your team in the future, what are the characteristics that, if somebody beyond listening to you here, beyond telling you that you're an asshole, what are the other characteristics that you're looking for from somebody on your team, like that you think makes somebody be successful in this space?
I think it is that idea of team, of being willing to consistently put your what you think are your own goals, not personal development goals, not career objectives, not those things, and that's not what I'm talking about, but the things that you think are important to be able to set aside to help others achieve their goals. That's immensely valuable in your early career, both to gain that experience, and others will remember that. They'll take that to other departments with them and bring you along. They'll take that to other companies and bring you along because you were part of the team. Again, you're as an environmental health and safety professional, unless you're working for an environmental health and safety consulting nonprofit, the goal is not environmental health and safety. The goal is to make money. You are, whether you identify with it or not, you are part of a larger team that is a business. The more you can exemplify those characteristics or those traits within the smaller team that you have, the more successful you'll be, because that people will gravitate towards you and pull you into their teams, because that's what makes things successful. So seek to be part of teams and other people's initiatives and make their things as important or more important than your things. And that will pull you forward.
Makes sense to me. So I guess with that, before we wrap things up here, well, first off, I just want to say thanks to you. I think this has been awesome. Anything as we kind of look forward to the next year? I mean, I'd love to get you back on here and check in here in a little bit, maybe once you've got your feet under you a little bit more in your current role. So I guess with that, anything you want to kind of share before we wrap up? Anything you're looking forward to as you look forward to the kind of the next year professionally? Obviously, a lot of us the world's changing or returning to not being changed or whatever. Anything you're kind of looking forward to as we wrap things up?
I mean, I'm looking forward to putting in some processes and programs that are going to move the business forward. I love to create and love to build to make an impact to the business. So I'm extremely energized about the opportunity to do so again and solve a lot of people's problems. I mean, it's easy to be the new guy to come in because everybody wants to dump on the old guy or the old processes, or tell you, here are all my problems. I genuinely enjoy hearing them so that I can go fix them. And then now you owe me one. So I've got a whole team full of people scattered all throughout the region that all owe me a favor because I've fixed their problem. So that means we can quickly move through the next initiatives that I think are important.
Just to keep you honest on that, what can you give me a snapshot of what's your dream for where your function is, let's say a year from now, after you've had a chance to put those systems in place? Can you paint us a picture, and then I can hold you accountable to it when we have that call?
Absolutely. Tangible, reasonable leading indicator metrics, right? Those 3-4 things that we've got those things down, they're fully implemented and everybody's running with them, so that we've got results in order to go into next year with data to how are we going to build on those? What are the next metrics? Because we know we've killed this process. Now we're ready for step 2, right? That's step 1, that we've got a efficient, easy data recording, data reporting system, so that my people aren't sitting in front of a computer when they don't want to be, and they can be out on the floor engaging our people. And that we've got one standardized playbook that we're all operating from, not this division is different than that division is different than this site is different than that site. It doesn't matter what one plant manufactures versus the other one. They're all still human beings in there that are ruining all our metrics. Design the programs to let them be successful. And it doesn't matter whether you're making, we were making paper early in my career. making duct tape or trash bags in the middle of it, or making light switches now. It's all the same process.
Okay. Well, I guess to all of your team members who've listened to this, now they know what they can do to really get in your good graces. You've given them the playbook here. And I guess with that, I just want to say thanks. I think this has been awesome. Looking forward to clipping that out, doing another recording in a year from now and saying, did you do your homework? I think that'll be pretty fun. And yeah, that's it for me. Anything you want to say before we wrap things up?
No, thanks a lot, Joe. I appreciate the time. Stay safe, buddy.
I really hope you enjoyed that episode with Shane. I've really enjoyed getting to know Shane over the last year or so and seeing his transition, from Smith Medical now into Legrand. Really cool to see. And I think he's a smart guy who has a lot of really interesting takes and approaches things in a pretty practical way. As far as wrapping things up, so obviously, I know it's a little bit trite, but if you did enjoy the show, reviews are awesome. 5 stars are awesome. But even more than that, if you could just connect with me, Joe Meadows, on LinkedIn, send me a message. Let me know that you're listening. Let me know what we could do to improve. I would certainly love that. That's it. Huge thanks to Val for producing the show, and looking forward to the next one. Have a great day.